Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. As promised, I've put together a video covering some of the more affordable Radeon RX 5700 XT graphics cards, and I'll be comparing their operating volume, temperatures, power consumption, and we'll also have a quick look at gaming performance. But before all that, today's video is sponsored by PC Case Gear, Australia's premier online PC store. Whenever I'm in the need for a product, they're the first place I turn to, and I've been a customer of theirs for years now, so I really can attest to the quality of their service. I value their broad product range, competitive pricing, customer support, and easy to navigate website. With 2 decades of experience, I know I can trust PC Case Gear to look after you guys as well as they look after me. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so before I jump into the results, I'll just quickly go over each model, giving you a good look at the cooler and the PCB design. Also, please note, although we recently looked at the Asus TUF model in a dedicated video, I'm just going to quickly touch on that one for this video because it is an affordable 5700 XT graphics card. So if you didn't see that review, then it's probably important to know where that one stands, or at least how it stacks up to the rest of these, because you'll no doubt be tossing up between something like the Sapphire Pulse, the MSI Mech, the PowerColor Red Dragon, the Asrock Challenger, which isn't going to sit up there, and then of course the Asus TUF, because they're all around that $10 to $20 over the MSRP. Starting with the Asus TUF Gaming X3 RX 5700 XT OC, this is a great looking graphics card that's priced just $10 to $20 over the MSRP. Sadly though, it suffers from a major design flaw that sees the memory run at over 100 degrees, which really is a deal breaker. Cooling overall though, it's pretty bad anyway. The GPU and VRM, for example, run hotter than they should, particularly given the high fan speed. Pulling the card apart revealed a few worrying signs. Firstly, what appeared to be a big bulky heatsink really wasn't. Rather, it weighed just 382 grams, making it one of the smallest heatsinks you'll actually find fitted to a 5700 XT graphics card. But worse still was the memory cooling. A small 24-gram plate sat atop the 8 GDDR6 memory modules, and with no airflow, it got extremely hot. Moving on then, we have the MSI RX 5700 XT Mech OC, and this is another neat looking graphics card that will suit most builds very well. Like the Evoke OC, it is a very compact graphics card measuring just 232mm long, 126mm tall, and 46mm wide. It weighs in at 799 grams, and the bare heatsink accounts for just 348 grams, making it lighter than even the 355 gram cooler found on the Evoke OC. A few people have told me that the Evoke and Mech share the same cooler, but that's not correct. In a lot of ways they are very similar, but they're certainly not the same. The Mech design is unquestionably cheaper. The memory lacks a proper base plate, and then the nickel-plated copper base, which was used to cool the GPU on the previous model, has been removed entirely. This means the GPU comes in direct contact with the copper pipes, and some have claimed this does work better. The VRM gets its own small finned heatsink, which connects to the primary heatsink using thermal pads, so a bit of an interesting choice there. The Mech OC also features what I'd call a fake backplate, as it really only seems to serve to make the card run hotter. By this I mean it's just a piece of insulating plastic, there's no thermal vents, and obviously using thermal pads would be useless here as it is made out of plastic. Overall, a very basic design, and I'm not expecting to be that impressed by the Mech OC. Next up we have the Sapphire Pulse, and this is by far the most impressive looking card so far, and by that I mean the build quality is excellent. Aesthetically the card looks okay. I prefer the look of the 2 previous models, but I feel this one will actually work well. It's quite heavy for a compact card, tipping the scales at 920 grams, making it 15% heavier than the Mech OC. The primary heatsink is used to cool just the GPU, and it weighs in at 354 grams, which is quite light, but remember it is only used to cool the 5700 XT GPU. The GDDR6 memory and the VRM have their own 56 gram heat spreader / heatsink. It's really a well designed bit of kit, and I expect it to work very well. The aluminium backplate also features a number of vents, and Sapphire have used it as a heat spreader to remove built up heat from the PCB behind the VRM. This is a really nice 5700 XT graphics card, and it can be had quite regularly for just $10 over the MSRP. Moving on to the Asrock RX 5700 XT Challenger, and what we have here is a rare dual slot card that measures 281mm long, 137mm tall, and just 42mm wide. Given those dimensions, it is surprisingly light at just 745 grams, and this makes it the lightest 5700 XT graphics card we've ever seen. So that's probably not a good sign. The primary heatsink weighs just 289 grams, which is super light for a 5700 XT cooler. It does feature 4 large copper heat pipes that stretch the entire length of the card, but the problem here I feel will be the lack of surface area for those aluminium fins. Again, the card measures just 42mm wide, and that doesn't leave much room for the heatsink, and as a result, the fins for the most part measure just 10mm wide. And for context, you're looking at more like 16mm on Sapphire's Pulse. Although the primary heatsink is a bit underwhelming, I was really surprised to find what looked like quite impressive GDDR6 and VRM heatsinks, very similar to what we see on the Sapphire Pulse. Combined, these two aluminium bits weigh 48 grams, so 14% lighter than the version used by Sapphire. Unfortunately, the Challenger does have a solid backplate with no ventilation, and it's not connected to the PCB using any thermal pads, so it might actually act like an insulator, which could hurt performance if that's the case. Finally, we have the PowerColor RX 5700 XT Red Dragon, and this is another $410 US model, but I have to say, it does appear very basic. That said, it does feature a dual bias, and that's something you won't find on the Asrock Challenger or MSI Mech. The card measures just 240mm long, making it very compact. It also measures 132mm tall and just 41mm wide, so another rare dual slot 5700 XT graphics card. The card itself looks great though. It's a little on the light side, tipping the scales at just 827 grams, making it only a little bit heavier than the Mech OC. The heatsink, which cools everything, the GPU, the GDDR6 memory and the VRM, weighs just 304 grams, making it only a fraction heavier than the Asrock Challenger heatsink, which cooled just the GPU. It does look to be a very well-made heatsink though. It features 5 copper heat pipes, a copper base plate for the GPU, and aluminium spreaders for both the memory and VRM. I'm very interested to see how this model performs, so let's get into the results. As usual, we're testing with our Core i9 1900K GPU test rig. The CPU has been overclocked to 5GHz, and we have 16GB of DDR4 3400 memory. The latest drivers available at the time of testing have been used, and as I mentioned earlier, we have just a few select games to look at. Here's a look at the 5 budget models side by side after an hour-long loop of the F1 2019 benchmark, all tested in a 21-degree room. The Pulse and Mech OC provided the lowest GPU temperatures, but while the Pulse fans were spinning at around 2300 RPM, the Mech's fans were whizzing away at 2800 RPM. This, in my opinion, makes the Red Dragon's 21-degree max GPU temperature all the more impressive, as its fans were spinning at just 1700 RPM, and that made the PowerColor card noticeably quieter than even the Pulse. Though the Pulse did clock a little bit higher, but we'll look at those results in a moment. Meanwhile, temperatures for not just the GPU, but also the GDDR6 memory and VRM looked very poor for the Asrock Challenger and Asus TUF Gaming. As expected, when it comes to actual gaming performance, there's virtually no difference between these entry-level 5700 XT graphics cards. Hell, there's barely any difference between a base model 5700 XT and a cream of the crop model, and we see that here in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for example, as we're talking about just a 2 FPS difference. And really, it's a similar story when testing with Forza Horizon 4. The Pulse nudged ahead by a single frame, but with just a 2% variation in performance between the fastest and slowest 5700 XTs, it's not really worth talking about. That being the case, we'll wrap this up with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and although we do see up to a 4% difference between the fastest and slowest models here, we're only talking about a 3 FPS performance discrepancy. So let's move on for a detailed look at power consumption, thermals, and operating volumes. First up, we have the GPU power draw, and this gives us a good idea of just how aggressively tuned each model is, whether that be clock speed, voltage, or perhaps both. When compared to the Red Dragon, the Pulse consumed 8% more power, so that means its cooler has a bit more heat to deal with. The Red Dragon and TUF Gaming were both very efficient when it comes to power consumption, both only use slightly more power than the reference model. And then here's a quick look at total system consumption, and here we see when taking the entire system draw into account, the Pulse only increases consumption by 4% over the Red Dragon. So while it won't impact total system consumption all that much, the Pulse cooler certainly has quite a bit more heat to deal with. Okay, so here's a look at out-of-the-box GPU operating temperatures, and please note, we will be covering operating volume in a moment. The Mech OC looks quite good here, but remember, the fans were spinning roughly 1000 RPM faster than PowerColor's Red Dragon, so the 3-degree drop in temperature isn't very impressive. The Asrock Challenger and Asus TUF Gaming fans were also spinning quite fast, around 2000 to 2200 RPM, and yet they only managed a peak operating temperature of 79 and 77 degrees respectively, so a very poor result for Asrock and Asus. The The Sapphire Pulse matched the Thick 2, Red Devil and Gaming X with a peak memory temperature of 76 degrees. The Red Dragon also did very well, peaking at just 78 degrees. And then beyond that, we have the Mech OC hitting 82 degrees, the Challenger at 84 degrees, and, well, you guys probably already know how badly the Tough Gaming did. You can also see it on the graph if you didn't, so not much more to say about that one. Let's just move on. Here we have the VRM temperatures. The Pulse performed the best of the bunch, peaking at just 64 degrees, while PowerColor's Red Dragon was just a degree hotter at 65 degrees. MSI's Mech OC did quite poorly, especially given the fan speed, while the Asus Tough Gaming and Asrock Challenger, well, they just straight up sucked. Okay, so here we can see just how loud the Mech OC is with its fan spinning at 2800 RPM, 56 decibels. That is criminally loud. This basically invalidates the Mech OC's temperature just seen, as winding the fans down to a more bearable volume would see the card run far too hot. The Asus Tough Gaming, while much quieter, still made quite a bit of noise, and of course it fails due to the horrible memory temperatures. The Asrock Challenger is also a massive disappointment. It's a hot, loud 5700 XT that you should most certainly avoid. That leaves the Sapphire Pulse and PowerColor Red Dragon, both excellent options in my opinion, and equally good. The Pulse is clocked a little more aggressively and therefore consumes a little more power, meaning the fans have to spin a little bit faster to deliver the results just seen. The Red Dragon also runs a little hotter, but it's also noticeably quieter thanks to a 3 decibel reduction in operating volume. Right, so that's how those 5 RX 5700 XT models stacked up. Sadly, I think it's fair to say we had more duds than winners. I really like the Sapphire Pulse, as it technically looks to be the best designed 5700 XT out of the bunch, but the Red Dragon also did amazingly well, for what appears to be a very simple design. As for the duds, the Asus Tough is a hard pass for a number of reasons, most notably of which is the extreme GDDR6 memory temperatures. The Asrock Challenger was all-round subpar, and the MSI Mech OC, well, it's not a complete disaster, but out of the box, the 2800 RPM fan speed kind of is. Dial that back and you have another subpar 5700 XT. So, knowing everything that we now know, which one should you buy? Well, for US shoppers, that's pretty easy. The Gigabyte RX 5700 XT Gaming OC, it's just $400 right now, so what are you waiting for? The Thick 2 is also just $400 right now, and that's actually a pretty good graphics card at that price. Certainly a solid purchase, so if you can't get the Gigabyte model, then the XFX card will work well. Then we have the Sapphire Pulse and PowerColor Red Dragon, both available at $410 US, and really either will work very well. Though the Red Dragon does have the advantage of taking up just 2 slots, something very few 5700 XTs offer. Beyond that, it's either the PowerColor Red Devil for $440, the Sapphire Nitro Plus for $450, or MSI's Gaming X for the same $450 US. Well, I hope for those of you trying to decide which 5700 XT graphics card to buy that this video was helpful. I'm personally very glad we decided to round out our 5700 XT testing with some of these harder to get budget models. And of course, a really big thank you to all our Patreon members who really do make this content possible. I've spent well over 2,000 Australian dollars to make this video. So yeah, that's definitely not something we could do without the support of our Patreon members. So again, a really big thank you to everyone. And that's going to do it for this one. If you would like to get more involved with the channel and make content, like I said, like this possible, then yeah, feel free to jump over to our Patreon account. You get access to our exclusive Discord chat, monthly live streams, and a few other cool perks. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one, and I think this is going to do it for our 5700 XT. I can't even say it anymore. I think that's going to do it for our 5700 XT coverage. I really do. I think we're done. I'm not going to say we're 100% done because I did that last time and then, you know, this happened. I can't even fiddle the 5700 XTs that we've looked at in this shot. Do not fall over. But yeah, we've looked at a lot now. I think we've pretty well got to the bottom of it. If you're on a budget, these 2 cards are solid, and then the Gigabyte card. Pricing may vary in your region, but those 3 seem to be affordable models that work really well, and then you know sort of which models to avoid. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you want to give it a like, do that. You can subscribe. And most of all, just thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve. I'll see you again next time.